Welcome to another episode of Delay The Decay. Today my guest is Dr. Melissa Milanak, a licensed clinical psychologist, sleep expert, executive consultant, TEDx speaker, and founder of Mind Impact Consulting. For more than 2 decades, she has studied the intersection of sleep, anxiety, stress, and trauma, and now helps leaders like you and organizations use better sleep to improve performance and well-being. Today, we're going to explore why ambitious people sacrifice sleep, what quality sleep really means, how stress and racing thoughts can disrupt it, and how better rest can improve our health, our relationships, our leadership, and our overall performance. It's going to be an incredible hour together. Melissa, welcome to Delay The Decay.
Thank you for having me. Definitely action-packed hour.
Yes, it's going to be fun. So, first question, what is one habit or discipline that you are incorporating into your life rhythms to help you continue moving upwards and to the right?
Well, obviously there are many sleep strategies that I am working on and incorporating, but I have a feeling that we will be covering a lot of those through the conversation on the next hour. So I wanted to pick something that was tangentially related. And that is using the concept of something called planned neglect. And what I mean by that is there are so many things that we could focus our time on. And there are so many pressures that we put on ourselves, especially as busy leaders and high achievers. And so at the end of the day, most of the time we might feel like, oh, I failed. I didn't accomplish this, or I didn't do this thing. And so how do you take back that feeling of having control over those pieces, obviously giving control when you need to, but feeling that accomplishment and that ability to get done what really needs to be prioritized. And so if you think about the idea of planned neglect, look at that to-do list and choose what are the things that you're not going to do that day. You get to have that choice many times. Maybe you want to spend more time with your family, so you're going to choose not to cook dinner that night, and instead you're going to order something in. It can still be nutritious, but you can allocate that time resource somewhere else. And when you do that, then it's not the failure. It was your choice to prioritize the things that you get to choose to do.
I love that. That is so helpful. And is that something that you do or you'd recommend that people do like on a weekly basis or on a daily basis? What's that look like?
I see it as a combination of both. So there may be certain things that you know you need to get done throughout the course of the week. But maybe you decide, you know what, I really haven't been around a lot and I want to spend time with my partner. So I'm not going to do the laundry tonight. I'm going to do it tomorrow. It's still going to be able to get done. There may be certain things that you had scheduled that day that you needed to do. And I really wanted to drop this off at the dry cleaners, or I needed to run and pick up these groceries, but something else came up. Oh my goodness, I have this opportunity to spend this time with someone, or I can get that workout class in. And so usually what I will advise people to do and do myself is create the list of the need to have. And it's not just in the domains of work and family, but also for your own personal needs. And then choose from that list of what are the things that I want to get done or that need to get done, but not today, because we always feel that pressure of right now. So there's certain things you evaluate each day and certain things that are going to be broader projects.
Okay. Well, with that, it's so helpful. I think we're gonna end the podcast right there. Thank you for joining us today. Now, that was so helpful. It reminds me of a book that I read years ago that had a massive impact on me, and that was Essentialism. And it really influenced a lot of what I do, talking about living the prioritized life, that when we know what our priorities are, kind of from top to bottom, it makes it a little bit easier to live out planned neglect, because we always know what's of most important. And that can change day to day, week to week, year to year. But for the most part, we've got big rocks that are really important, and we got the smaller rocks that can wait sometimes.
Well, you reminded me of that figure in the book where it has all the arrows going on all the different directions. And I think that that's it with you saying, the daily choices or what you're doing for the week. There may be small things that you're doing each day that lead towards that larger goal, but there can also be smaller pivots. And it reminds me of what you and I were talking about before we started the episode with sleep, for instance, and with the efforts that you're putting in. And sometimes it is, okay, I might neglect folding that laundry so that I can go to bed a half an hour earlier. But by giving myself that ability to get more quality sleep, I'm going to be more effective and efficient, or I'm going to be more present. I'm going to make smarter choices. So oftentimes the thing that we're choosing to neglect, obviously there's certain things that we can't, but for the things that we truly can, it's sometimes replacing the good for the better. And it's the way that we think about it, and realizing that, like, for instance, prioritizing our sleep and the sleep schedule, 15 minutes is enough to change your entire sleep schedule. So that extra activity or that extra Netflix episode, I know you've earned it, but by switching those things, how are you prioritizing yourself so that then you can prioritize the things that really matter in your life?
That's so good. My wife went to a play the other night with my daughter-in-law, and a couple of my granddaughters. And I just decided I was going to have a guys' night. So I watched Moneyball with Brad Pitt. It was so good. And I went and got a half a gallon of ice cream. I haven't done that in so long, and it was I don't even know why I went there just now, other than, like, I didn't sleep well. I kind of had an upset stomach the rest, but it might have been worth it though. So I don't know. But
sometimes it's those little things where it said, you know what, how often do I carve out time for me, or do I do those things? But you made the informed decision. You know that your stomach may not love you, or it might be a heavier food, but that's the other thing, is then if not tonight, the next night, which also, again, will tie into part of what we'll talk about from a sleep standpoint, is that sometimes we are making choices. We're going to stay up late to watch those extra innings, or we're going to go to that event or do something and travel and jet lag. Just because there are the occasional disruptions didn't mean that it was the rest of the week, and didn't mean that the entire week was also lost. And I think that's what ties back to that broader concept, are that you got to make that choice though. And so you said, you know what, I got to do this thing for me. I got to have my guys' night. It was fun. It was worth it. And I know that it's a small choice that isn't going to disrupt the whole rest of the week either. Because I think sometimes we can get that anticipatory anxiety of what's going to happen next, or what's it going to disrupt, and almost make it happen and manifest in some ways as well. So sometimes we need to let ourselves off the hook.
That's so good. We need that permission, don't we? Mm-hmm. I've never worn a glucose monitor, and I'm wearing one right now for my second day. And I was talking to a guy at the gym just a couple hours ago about it, and he had worn it, and he had just talked about, like, he knows what makes his glucose spike. And we talked about some of the things that make our glucose spike are good gifts from God, quite honestly. It's important to know what causes that spike so that we don't, like, eat it every single day, because that's not good for our health. But there's times where, like, seeing that spike on the glucose monitor will remind me, like, I just celebrated a birthday party with my grandkids and ate a giant piece of cake, and that was worth it for that spike. I'm not going to do that every day, but.
Well, it's interesting because when you say that, it makes me think of HRV. And what I mean by that is, so for a lot of folks with heart rate variability, opposite of our hopeful golf scores, right? We want to have as large of a number as possible. But what that's showing is that our heart rate is more variable. In order for that to happen, it can't just be that we're at a constant state of rest and calm. We have to have our heart be able to spike. And maybe it spikes because we're doing a tough workout. Maybe it spikes because, a family member just showed up and surprised us at the house, or something good happened. It also needs to spike when there could be a potential threat, but we celebrate that because that means that our body is able and healthy enough to be able to jump into action to protect us. And I think that that's an interesting piece because some people say, well, I don't want my heart to get up, but we do, because it means that it's healthy enough to be able to do that. It's the same thing with feeling pain and with feeling sleepy. And what I mean by that is, as much as people say, I wish that nobody felt pain anymore, but there's a purpose for it, in the sense of, if I put my hand on a stove and it starts to feel hot, I want it to hurt so that I move my hand, because otherwise, if I left my hand there, I would burn all the way through and I could really injure myself. I need to feel sleepy, not because it's interrupting everything on my to-do list, but because that's the indication that it's time for my body to be able to rest and to recuperate and to have all of that health restoration that it needs. So I love what you're saying there, because I think that just like the spike in the blood sugar, okay, great, I have this amazing blessing I got to celebrate, or I'm the person that can afford that snack or that treat, or I'm healthy enough my body can do that. How great that your blood sugar can adjust for the people that can't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Well, let's talk about sleep. And you are a sleep expert. You've spoken internationally. You speak in front of groups and companies and leadership teams all the time. But it wasn't a straight path to where you're at today. Your career began with trauma, PTSD, anxiety, and depression. What did you start to notice? What did you start to notice about the role of sleep that was causing trauma and stress and making PTSD worse?
So whenever you look at individuals so as you said, my career started in the world of trauma, PTSD, working with people that had experienced these significant life events. And what kept coming up over and over again is that for people that had experienced these, one of the things that they were reporting was significant sleep disruption. And most people are going to think of PTSD with the flashbacks. You watch Born on the 4th of July, there's movies, right? Or you think of the people with that, or you think of the nightmares. But what so many people don't realize is that it's actually more the insomnia like for a lot of people. It's the difficulty to fall asleep. It's the waking up multiple times. It's the sleeping and not feeling rested. And so the more and more that I was seeing with individuals with trauma, looking at anxiety, was that sleep was actually, with the research right now, sleep is disruption is the most prevalent symptom for people experiencing trauma and PTSD. When they were working on the latest, looking at how we characterize it, it's a book called the DSM that the psychologists use, and looking at the symptoms for PTSD, 90% of people that had experienced a traumatic event were reporting sleep disruptions and sleep problems, and over 92% for our military and our veterans. And so that's really where not only was I seeing it in the therapy room, I was seeing it in the research studies, and really wanted to better understand this. And as I was doing the work looking at both places, realizing that not only was it an outcome or an area that was impacted, but for the people that were having sleep problems before they were exposed to these events, it was increasing the likelihood that they would develop PTSD. And when you were treating sleep, because so many people were very sensitive topics, maybe they didn't trust yet, or they weren't ready to go there. And so instead of just immediately jumping in to do the trauma treatment or the anxiety treatment, if you could help to fix the sleep, we were seeing significant increases in the other related symptoms for other mental health concerns. And so for me, it was an opportunity to have a broader impact, to help individuals, to help them across all different areas that can be negatively impacting their life, but then also seeing how it impacts their families and their communities and all these other trickle-down effects.
Well, I'm glad you were paying attention to what you were seeing, and now you're bringing it public, because I know it's helping out so many people. Does sleep have healing impact on somebody with like a severe schizophrenia or that type of mental disease?
Sleep is going to have, depends on the term of healing, but in general, yes. And what I mean by that is when we sleep, we go through different stages of sleep. And each stage does something different. We need all of them. So we have deep sleep where our physical body heals and repairs, and we can think of structures and such. We also have REM sleep, which is where our brain does a lot of healing and repairing. It's also where I say our brain takes out the trash. So our 3-pound brain produces over 5 pounds of toxins every year. And when we're sleeping, it literally, think of it as it slightly squeezes the toxins to the outside. Our cerebral spinal fluid goes through and flushes it out and cleans it up, it expands. But during that REM sleep is where we're seeing a lot of our cognitive functioning, what our brain is doing, our emotion regulation. This is where memory, so everything that happened during the day, our brain is etching it in so we can remember it weeks, months, and years later. We see sleep playing such a significant role for that brain healing, brain health. That's why people that have, for instance, brain injuries, think of concussion, think of TBIs, those types of things after stroke, where a lot of times people are needing more and more sleep for that brain to really heal and repair itself. So there's the physical part of it, and also what's happening cognitively and mentally within the brain, that sleep can set that off. That's why for people that aren't always getting the right amount of sleep that they need, we can actually see that triggering episodes for mental health. For instance, somebody that has bipolar disorder, if their sleep is disrupted, it can trigger a manic episode, for instance. So it pervades across many different mental health concerns, from mild to severe.
Mm-hmm. My Apple Watch has, I think, 4 categories: awake, core sleep, deep, and REM. I think it's those 4. Are they equally important for somebody like me?
Really great question. So the quick deviation to how sleep works and how that ties in. So we talked about, we have different stages of sleep that make up cycles of sleep. So basically at night, when it's time to fall asleep, the first thing you enter in is what's called stage 1 sleep. And that's where your senses are shutting down. So if there's a small noise, you're not immediately going to wake up. That typically, now I'm going to talk about a typical sleeper. Obviously, it may look different depending on how physically active you are, your age, and such. For a typical sleeper, about 2 to 5% of your sleep each night should be spent in that stage 1, kind of falling asleep. We're also going to experience something called stage 2 sleep. That's what they talk about in the sleep world. But on your different wearables, it may be described as light sleep or core sleep or different names. That's going to make up about 45 to 55% of your sleep. This is an important transition stage. So if you were driving a manual transmission car, you wouldn't go straight from first gear to third gear. You'd have to go through second to transition back and forth. This core light sleep, that's going to make up the majority of our sleep, because that's going to help us to go back and forth between our body healing and repairing itself and our brain healing and repairing itself. Then we have deep sleep, or stage 3 sleep, slow wave sleep. It's called all different things. If you do sleep studies, the wearables, the tracking, that's where the physical body heals and repairs itself. And typically we're going to spend more time in that type of sleep in the early stages of sleep. Like if we're sleeping for 8 hours, say the first 4 hours, because typically physical body repair will be prioritized. It's considered survival. I'm hiking in the woods, I hear a rustling in the trees, I need my legs to work so I can run away. If my brain is sharp but I can't protect myself, I don't survive. And this is what's important for your leaders listening, because for a lot of people, they're not getting the full amount of sleep that they need, but because the body heals first, when they wake up after a few hours, because they feel physically rested, they think, oh, I can get by on less. So we'll put a pin in that for the moment. But we have stage 1 where we fall asleep, stage 2, stage 3 sleep, the deep sleep, ideally is going to make up about 20 to 25% of our sleep each night. And that's usually going to be our first cycle of sleep, which lasts about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Once we get through that, then that's where we start to see the REM sleep. That REM sleep, that's where the brain, as we talked about, all the healing and repairing, and ideally that makes up about 20 to 25% of our sleep as well. So when we talk about them all being important, they're all important because they serve different purposes, but we need different amounts. Just as if you were going to cook, we need a little bit of that salt and we need that sodium, but we're not going to need the same amount as we might need of our protein or of our vegetables. But they all do different things, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I've been really trying to work on my sleep the last probably 2 years. I'm a baby boomer, and our badge of honor for people like me are like, I'd rather burn out than rust out. And I remember when I was in the investment business, I would live on 5.5 hours sleep. And as I started reading, and as I started really paying attention to my emotions and my stress level and all that, I started getting more sleep. But even today, Melissa, like last night, I think I had total sleep of 7.5 hours, and I never get more than 8 or 10% deep. And my REM is, on a good night, is 22%, something like that. Are there things, we're going to talk about overall sleep, but are there things that I can do to really attack deep sleep and try to get more deep sleep, or attack REM? Get better REM?
Great question. So there are a number of things. The first to note is that as we become more wise, as we age, Typically, it's called our sleep architecture. The way that our sleep is made up and what comprises it at night does change. And so the older we get, we start to get less and less of deep sleep. So that is something that naturally is going to decrease. And so that's why as we get older, it takes us longer to heal. It's why we may feel more aches and pains and things like that, because we're not spending as much time for the body healing and repairing itself as we're spending the time in the REM sleep. So usually when we're looking at those trackers, as we get older, we might see that our REM is still staying mostly in that 20 to 25% range, but our deep sleep is usually the first thing that starts to go. It's one of the jokes the universe plays on us. Now, yes, we can work to try to increase that, and some people are going to have more of a positive result from that than others. A lot of times, our physical activity is going to be something that is going to help us to be able to increase that, because of the fact that when we're more active, then it's more time that our body is going to register that it needs to help us heal and to recover. Some of it comes down to our sleep scheduling and what we're doing so that our body and brain can know that it can afford to allocate resources to both healing the body and the brain. So obviously life is busy. Practically, you can't always stick to the same schedule every single night. In an ideal world, we could. When we go to bed at the same time every night, it's going to be easier to fall asleep because our body knows when to feel tired. But even if we can't do that, waking up at a core set time 7 days a week, that means you might be getting up at 6 or 7 a.m. on the weekends. But when you're sleeping the right amount and your body's getting what it needs, you don't have to sleep your day away. But the reason that that's so important and how this ties into your question is that if you say you're waking up, you're a person that wakes up at 6 a.m. every day. Well, maybe you usually go to bed at 10 at night and you have your 8-hour window. But on the weekends, maybe you stay up till midnight for whatever reason. Well, if your body and brain know, okay, regardless of when he goes to bed, he's still going to get up at 6 a.m., then it can be more informed on how to be more efficient on healing you. Because if it thinks, oh, okay, I have 8 hours tonight, and it spends the first 4 healing your body, and then it switches to the brain, and it has 2 hours, and then you wake up, then it lost those 2 hours. So after a while, it's going to have to try to play catch up. So that's where a little bit of scheduling, as consistent as we can be, helps us to be more efficient. And sometimes we'll see the deep sleep and REM sleep increase or balance out because now we're helping our system to better regulate for healthy repair.
Gotcha. Yep. So we're speaking to unashamedly ambitious people. These are men and women who are builders and creators, just like you, just like me, all different ages. They're busy at work or in their ministries. They're building families. They're going to the gym. They're really watching what goes in their mouth. They're working on being fit, and all those things leaves a little bit of time to sleep. That sleep isn't the priority. They thought, you know what? I want to prioritize exercise, eating, my relationships, my job. Sleep can wait. What would you say to those people?
I would say that unfortunately they have it backwards. Because when we are deprioritizing our sleep, all of the other things are unfortunately not going to be able to reach their full potential. And I'll say it this way. So almost everyone has their smartphone. And when you first are using your smartphone, you can plug it in and it can charge to 100%. And after a while, it seems like it's not holding its charge as long. And if you check the battery capacity, it will say that eventually the battery can only charge to about 80%, right? So what happens over time is if we're not using it correctly, it starts to decrease. How does this connect? If we're not getting the full sleep that our body needs, for instance, our workouts will stop working for us. What you might find is that you're hitting that plateau because if we don't have enough sleep for our body to rejuvenate itself, then it can't heal from the workout and we're not going to have the muscle growth the same way that we have. For the gentleman listening to the call, 1 hour less sleep at night than your body needs ages you 11 years of testosterone. So what I mean by that practically, say you need 8 hours a night, but you're only getting 7 because you're getting up to get the workout in. Well, if you're 49, your body's acting as a 60-year-old. in testosterone. And I'm not even going to begin to touch hormone levels for the ladies listening to this call. That's a whole other podcast episode. But what I'm saying is the body will actually start to break down muscle and hold on to fat and use the fat to fuel the workout or to give the energy for the rest of the day. So it can be counterproductive the way that our body heals and can increase our risk to be prone for injury, for instance. From a nutrition standpoint, we'll be fighting cravings more. Because when we're not getting the right amount of sleep, well, our body will start to crave the carbs and the sugars and the things that can give us that quick energy fix. And, as we get into relationships, for instance, yes, we want to spend that quality time, but if we're not getting the full amount of sleep, we're probably cheating ourselves out of REM sleep, which means our emotion regulation isn't happening the way we want it to. So our fuse is shorter. We might be a little more irritable. Maybe our focus and attention aren't what they ideally could be. So we miss that important thing that's our loved one said to us. And so there's just so many ways, even down from a financial standpoint, of making the right decisions and really trusting and being able to do the research and the due diligence. And there's just so many things that trickle down. But when I'm talking about prioritizing your sleep, I'm not saying actually take more hours out of your day. I'm not saying stop doing the things that matter. I actually teach people how to become a more efficient sleeper. Because if we're honest with ourselves and we really look at what our sleep looks like, the majority of us are spending a lot of time not sleeping. Maybe we're in bed for an hour reading on our phone and doom scrolling and watching things. Maybe we're laying in bed trying to fall asleep and we're becoming frustrated because we can't shut our brain off, and now we spent an hour trying to fall asleep, or we're up for 30, 40 minutes in the middle of the night. We can become more efficient. Take all of that time that we're spending in bed awake and allocate that to all the things that matter. And now there are more hours in your day, miraculously, and you're also healthier and getting more out of all those other things that really matter.
Well, I know you just caught everybody's ear to how to be an efficient sleeper. Would you connect efficiency in sleep to the circadian rhythm, and maybe even start by describing what the circadian rhythm is and why the average person should care about that?
So there are a number of different parts in there. So first, our circadian rhythm is going to be a system within our body that's going to regulate when we feel awake and alert and when we feel tired and sleepy. And most people talk about it as being that 24-hour cycle. It's actually 24.2. So if you didn't do anything, you would actually slowly rotate all the way around the clock. That's where light helps to trigger it. And what happens there is throughout the day, our body is governed. Light plays such a large role in triggering that. So our eyes perceive light. They send messages to different parts of the brain. I'll spare you all the technical terms, but think of it as a sleep switch. It's light out, be awake. It's dark out, be asleep. And so that's why what happens is the sun comes up, and if your windows are open, you're waking up. Because even when your eyelids are shut, you can still detect the light change. It wakes the system up. When it starts to get dark, that helps us to prepare to get sleepy. This is actually why so many people are now melatonin deficient. Because when it would get darker at night, then that change in light is what would trigger the brain to start to produce melatonin. And so that would happen 4 to 6 hours before we would go to bed. But now the sun never sets because our phone is in our face and it's so bright that we're not able to detect when the light changes happen. We can talk about that. There are practical things you can do to adjust the light settings, not just turn them down to help with the brain. But the idea there, again, is that all of those things trigger, same thing with when we eat. That's why with jet lag, a couple of the tricks are determining when you're eating your meals, when you're traveling somewhere and traveling home. Because if you eat that 9 p.m. meal on the plane when you're heading to Europe, and now you're actually eating at like 3 a.m. in the morning there. So it can actually take it another day to adjust. But so with the circadian rhythm in general, it's dictating when we feel awake, when we feel asleep, and it plays a role in different like growth hormone that's being produced, many other systems within our body. So that's why light is going to play a big role in it. And then also the consistency of when we're sleeping, of when we're eating, our temperature regulation. There are all of these little things that we can do that can help the body to know when we want it to, where we want it to be in that rhythm.
Mm-hmm. let's get a little bit technical. I know there's a few people. We're not doing the Peter Attia or Andrew Huberman show here, but we can get a little bit technical.
Yeah.
Our body produces serotonin in the morning and melatonin in the evening, and some of the things we do, like with the screens in front of our face, we're artificially producing serotonin in the evening. Correct? Is that?
Well, it gets a little more into that because also when we think of serotonin and like the role that, for instance, magnesium can have on helping serotonin to convert and it potentially being one of the things that can be converted into melatonin and how some of that process works. Mm-hmm. What's happening is that our optic nerve is sending light to the suprachiasmatic nucleus that's going to be in the brain. And that is triggering, should we be awake, should we be asleep? As the light starts to reduce, then it triggers, instead of producing more of those awake, so think of also GABA and glutamate. So GABA makes us feel tired and sleepy. Glutamate is more what we feel awake and alert. These are two systems that get impacted when we drink alcohol, for instance, which can be where we feel sleepy and awake and all these other components. We can go that direction if you want. But what's happening is those light switches and changes are telling our body what it should be converting certain mechanisms into. Just like we have, for instance, well, I won't go down all the hormone roads at the moment. But so when it is light out, our brain is taking those cues to keep producing the chemicals to make us be awake. When it starts to get dark, then it switches gears to start producing the cues to make us feel more tired and sleepy. That's why about 90% of people use melatonin incorrectly. And I always have to give the caveat, I'm not the prescribing provider, I don't know their medical conditions, but what most behavioral sleep medicine folks will share, again, check with your doctor, but that actually for melatonin, when you're taking the over-the-counter supplements, ideally, you're not taking it 20 to 30 minutes before bed. It's not a sedative or a hypnotic. It's not designed to knock you out. It actually is adjusting your circadian rhythm. So that's why they'll usually say take it at least, like some people will say take it 3 to 4 hours before bed. Some will say at least 1 to 2 hours before bed because you want to be taking it when your body would be spiking in it. And because these over-the-counter supplements, while they're helpful for you, they're not FDA regulated. So one of the biggest problems when people say, oh, this isn't working for me, they're usually doing 3 things. They're not taking the right amount, they're not taking it at the right time, and they're not actually taking what they think they are taking. Make sure you get a product that does third-party testing so that right now recent studies came out, they looked at the top 31 brands. It ranged from, it was minus 85% to positive 483% of the active ingredients. So you want to make, and a third of them were laced with the serotonin and the precursors for it. So you want to make sure that you're getting what you actually want to get. You want to make sure that you're taking it at the right time. And then also is going to be the amount. So most people take way too much. Usually they'll say for adults, 1 to 2 milligrams, maybe 3 max, 5 at the absolute max. But most of the gummies that people are buying and these other tablets and such, now what they're doing is they're taking 10, and taking more isn't going to make it work better.
Gotcha.
So there's so much there that we could dive into.
There's so much there. And this is a complete left turn.
Yeah.
This isn't about supplements, but it can be overwhelming for people to know, like, what is the right melatonin to buy, or whatever, X, Y, and Z. I take fish oil. Like there's a zillion fish oils out there. Have you found any particular apps or whatnot that like will help you scan a melatonin bottle and tell you if it's good or not?
I wish that it was that simple.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's not just one thing that'll say this is the pure one to get. And sometimes people will do certain online ordering or their trust. I will tell folks, if you have the luxury of having access to a compounding pharmacy, I usually will start them there because they know that they're getting exactly what they're getting from that space, and it's not usually more expensive. So just because it's a certain type of store doesn't always mean that you're getting. So I will tell them first, look up the product and search third-party testing. If the company does it, it's usually going to be either on the box or right on their website because they're proud of it, they want to show it, and they know that that's important to people. If it's hard to find that information, that may not be the brand for you. So I think there's some of those pieces in terms of simplifying that, especially when you're first getting started. Some folks will talk to their prescribing provider who may have certain, and the reason that you have to be cautious with that is there are certain ones that are going to be distributed in certain geographies. Even throughout the United States, there are some that are more frequently found in the Southeast versus the Northwest. So you want to make sure that you're checking for the third-party testing, checking for that. I typically am telling people to also look at things in their pure form, because a lot of times what will happen is they'll be mixing, for instance, like magnesium and the melatonin and the sleepy time things together, but because melatonin usually should be taken a few hours before bed, and the magnesium is something that's usually being taken 20 to 30 minutes before bed, oftentimes what you find is that you're taking one too early, one too late. How do you know the actual impacts of it? So there's a lot of the kind of mechanism of how it works on the body. There's the mechanisms of how to use it and access it and take it. I will say, since we're talking down this road, from the magnesium standpoint, there's less research that's been done on it. But for what most of the research is showing, there's about 8 or 9 different types of magnesium out there that you can get access to. And so a lot of people were thinking, oh, one is the same. And we're taking magnesium citrate because it was easily accessible. What I will say to you on that is it's usually used as a laxative or a stool softener. So you'll be regular, but maybe not regularly sleeping. So you want to be paying attention to the type. Magnesium glycinate, for instance, is the one that often is used. So think G, go to sleep. Some people are now looking at, L-theanate, or looking at the magnesium malate, M for muscles, for muscle aches. So it can be more complicated. I think some people just want to go out and buy something or order something on Amazon. And so it's going to take a little bit more digging, but it's worth it to then have it do what your body needs it to do and to set yourself up for success.
That's really good. There's a principle that you haven't explicitly called out, and but I'm going to state it, and you can correct me. Here's a principle that you may need testosterone, you may need HRT, you may need to take melatonin, but before you do any of those things, dial your sleep in. Like, see if you can have better rhythms before you go to bed. And then certainly get a testosterone shot or do HRT or take melatonin, but don't let those be the panacea. And when you're only sleeping 5 hours a night. Thoughts on that?
So much there. I think that it's one of those things where, to your point, there are people that are going to need certain supplements. There are people that are going to need certain things. Sometimes you get a cold and your body can heal from it. Sometimes it turns into something else and you need an antibiotic. It doesn't mean that you're weak for needing it. It just means that sometimes your immune system needed a boost. As we get older, our body does change the chemicals that it's producing. Like melatonin naturally decreases. So there are some people that are going to need that supplement. No different than you see a lot of women post-menopause that are more at risk for osteoporosis and need to take calcium supplements. I think that sleep is in this interesting category where there are some people that feel like if they're tired, it's a badge of honor, right? Or I'm just a poor sleeper, I'm never going to be a good sleeper. And you can be. I think, to your point, and what I will always share with folks is that step one, I would love to do the behavioral pieces first. Let's make certain tweaks. Let's make certain changes. Let's look at how we're treating our bed. Let's look at what our schedule is. Let's look at certain timing for things. There are some people where that may not be enough. And there's no supplement shaming or those things. But I think it's just, as you said, if you can put a Band-Aid on it, but then you stop it and the problem's still there, sometimes we can make these other adjustments and then you don't have to be taking chemicals for the body to do what it was designed to do naturally. It depends on certain health conditions, certain concerns, certain things. So I'll never say that it's 100% terrible wrong thing. And there are a lot of people that need it, but I think that we don't have to immediately jump to it. I mean, if you want to distill down what are the core things, there are basically 3 sets of tips that I tell every single person. If your sleep is not great, these are the first 3 or 4 things that you need to do. And if that's not helping, then we get to the next piece.
Give them to us. What were the 3 things? Right now.
Okay. So obviously there's always it depends in those pieces. But The first one, so there are two things that tie. When you look across all the research that's been done on sleep, and you look at what are the things that disrupt our sleep, and what are the things that, if you look at all different treatments that make can adjust your sleep, the two are going to be looking at your sleep schedule, your sleep window, and something we call a stimulus control, or how we treat our bed. What I mean by that. So one, if I said to you right now, okay, I'm going to go to the movies, I'm going to go to the cinema, what snack am I most likely going to get? What would you say most people would say?
Popcorn.
Right. Your brain immediately says, movies, popcorn. Mm-hmm. I want your brain that quickly to say bed sleep. Not bed stress, bed process, bed plan, bed my office, my snack, my this and this. So many people now are using their bed, they're watching TV, they're scrolling on their phones, they're eating their snack and doing all these things, and now your brain is confused. Am I supposed to be awake right now, or am I supposed to be asleep right now? It's why you fall asleep on the couch, and then you get in bed 2 hours later and you can't fall asleep because your brain thinks that the couch is where you sleep and the bed is where you solve the world's problems, because we haven't given our brain the chance to unwind. So if you're having trouble falling asleep, you're having trouble staying asleep, and your sleep isn't great, one of the quick fixes that you can do is return your bed to the place that you sleep. Don't sleep on the couch, don't sleep on the chair, and don't do anything else in bed. If you want to read before bed, fine, but do it on the couch or in the chair, and then the book gets put down, and then you get in bed. If you are a person that's traveling and you're on the road and maybe your bed is the only place to sit because you're in the hotel room, okay, sit on the edge of the bed and treat it like a couch. Or worst case, sit on top of the covers until you're done, put the things down, and then get under the covers. Give your brain some kind of clear trigger and clear sign that it's time to sleep. That's a really great one that will help. That's kind of one of those. Questions or comments on that one before I go to the next one?
We don't have a TV in our room, but I know a lot of people that do. Would you be as straightforward as say, get that TV out of there?
Very much so.
Yeah.
That's part of where I said like the 3 or 4, and we can go a little bit down the technology rabbit hole. But what happens there is, I mean, again, it's the light. But also, if you're in bed and you're watching something on TV, your brain is paying attention to what it is. And some people say, well, that's fine. I, do reruns of Seinfeld or episode, or whatever else that's running here. Okay, but there are a few things that play here. One, if you notice the commercials are louder than the regular programming. They're designed to get your attention. So you start to fall asleep, and then the volume change happens and it wakes you back up again. Not only the light, but there's that sound. Also, as you're falling asleep, your brain is scanning. Is there a threat? This is a thing we need to remember. Sleep is considered a vulnerable state. So if your brain detects that there's a potential threat, it's not going to let you rest because it wants you to be prepared to protect yourself. So if it hears a voice that says, oh, this person isn't supposed to be in bed with her, it's going to cause micro awakenings to check and make sure that that voice isn't a present threat. So you might be asleep, but you're going to hover in that light sleep instead of being able to get into the restorative stages. So, and when you're, again, watching that TV or the baby monitor or what you're looking on your phone or a million other things that are happening, now your brain is fighting with itself. Well, I want to stay awake to check it and see what happens next. And so for a lot of people, they're doing those things because that's for 2 reasons. One, that's become the sleep trigger. With children, we have a whole process. Wash your face, brush your teeth, read a story, say your prayers, all the things that you and your family do. What do we do as adults? Go, 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 get in bed, doom scroll. And that is our only trigger. So now we need it and we can't fall asleep without it because that's what we taught our brain is the step before sleep. So we need to replace that with other things. Do you see how that kind of, we do so much of that training without realizing it for ourselves. So if you need noise, fine, but static, a white noise, a fan, less light. And here's the thing, if you fall asleep just fine and you sleep through the night, don't fix what isn't broken. But if you're struggling with your sleep, let's look at how that is. So, and if maybe you're traveling and it sounds different, earplugs are great, an eye mask is great. But so it's how we're treating our bed. There's so much with our technology that we can talk about and how bad the snooze button is and many of those things.
Before you get to the other two, I do have one question. There's somebody I dearly love that will be tuning into this, that every night she puts her AirPods in and listens to
The sleep stories.
sometimes a sleep story, other times just a book, just something in her ear. And she claims that it helps her go to sleep. But I'm not so sure.
So this ties into one of the other two things that we were going to talk about.
Okay.
And so I'll talk a little bit about the shutting the brain off piece. And then I do want to take a minute to talk about the sleep window.
Okay.
So, because the number one thing for all your sleep is the sleep window. But that's what my TED Talk was focused on.
Yes.
The TEDx. So,
And that was excellent, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Yeah, I would encourage everybody to listen to it, and we'll link that in the show notes.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet.
So what happens for us is throughout the day, there's so much that's going on. And our brain is designed to process information. It needs to do that. So when the time we go to bed, if we haven't given our brain that chance all day because we've been so busy, our brain it's trying to vie for that moment. It's like, I need to process, I need to think. And so for most of us, because we go, we climb in bed and it's the first time we're alone with our thoughts all day. Scary, right? Our brain is running and racing and it's trying to plan for the next day and it's trying to sort things out. Now our brain is on full steam ahead mode because it finally got the chance to do what it needs, but we don't want it to because we're like, no, now your job is to go to sleep. I used you the way I wanted to use you. I didn't let you do what you needed to do, but now you need to sleep. So for many of us, what we'll do is we'll watch something just enough to engage our brain so that it distracts us from those thinking and planning and thoughts. And so that's where it's, okay, let me listen to the podcast. Let me watch this show that I've watched a bunch of times. The problem, there are two things there, is that one, then where do all those thoughts go? When does our brain get the chance to do the processing? And it will do some of it while we're sleeping, and that sometimes plays a role in what we dream about and such. But over time, we may wake up at 3 a.m, and now our brain is running and racing because now we don't have that distraction and it's trying to make that happen. So what I usually will help people to do, so there's kind of shut the body off, shut the brain off. How do we treat our bed? What are we doing with our light and our devices and the bedroom environment, that cold, dark, quiet, comfortable piece? And what are we doing with shutting off our mind? The best thing you can do here, about 10 to 15 minutes before it's time to go to bed, you take a notepad and a pen, no technology, outside of bed. And on the right-hand side, you write your to-do list for the next day. Have to go to the bank, have to go to the dry cleaners, have to send these emails, because you are going to lay in bed and you are going to plan for the next day. It's not just worrying, it's just thinking through the list. When you write it on that sheet of paper, you don't have to keep remembering it. You don't have to keep repeating it. You can give your brain permission to shut off. And then on the left-hand side of the page, you're going to do a brain download of everything running through your mind. And that's why I say set a timer for 5 minutes. Because the first minute's high level. Kids, finances, health. But the more you're forced to write, more and more starts pouring out of your brain. We're not creating worries. You're not going to be more anxious now before you go to bed. It's actually going to be less because your brain finally got to do what it needed. You write it on that sheet of paper and you are exhausted. And then you get in bed, and if the mind is still running and racing, you get back out of bed and you write more. Just like you take that puppy that you're house training and you keep putting it outside and teaching it to go outside, you teach your brain in bed is not where you get to think and process and solve the world's problems. So now you're more efficient the next morning because you have your to-do list before your coffee. You problem solved through. Your brain got the unwind time. It doesn't have to keep you awake or wake you up in the middle of the night. And now you're no longer taking your troubles to sleep with you or forcing yourself to fall asleep.
That is so good. So helpful.
And people, if you can also include your gratitude journal, you can include your prayers. Everybody has their process of what they're doing. I also have a lot of people that will write that down so that when they climb into bed, they have more of that quiet mind. If that is the time that somebody wants to say their prayers, if that's the time that somebody does want to do a mild meditation, if you find that there's a little bit still running through your brain, you can also use something called cognitive shuffling. And it does the same thing as like the podcasts and the TV, but now there's no device, there's no sound, there's no light. How cognitive shuffling works, take a word that's relaxing, say the word blanket, and visualize it nice and relaxing, and then start with the letter B. Okay, what are all the words that start with B? Is it, baboon, balloon, and then when I run out of B words, I skip to L, and I work my way through. You're never going to get to the end of the word. But your brain was engaged enough, but now you don't have to set the timer for it to shut off, or it's not running in the background. So there are things that you can do there to help quiet the mind and over time become less worrying about well, am I going to fall asleep tonight? And then now we dread the bed.
That's good. What if somebody goes through the alphabet like that, and A is absent sleep, B is bad sleep, C is can't sleep, and they get more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So usually that is something where, take all the joking aside, we'll say, don't pick a work related word. I don't want you to do something that's going to be specific. Same thing as it's great to read before bed, but don't read your emails. Don't read the workbook, instead something that is going to be engaging. Let this be that time. That's why we say pick a word that is related to something relaxing. Maybe it's waterfall, maybe it's ocean, whatever that is, but something that gives you that chance to reminisce and think through. And if you catch yourself going down that negative path, then usually I'll switch it and say, you know what? Congratulate yourself that your brain is working. You're remembering these things. Yes, this is here. If it really won't shut off, get out of bed and write more and then get back in bed. But teach the brain that it doesn't get to lay in bed and focus on the negative.
Are you describing cognitive behavioral therapy? Is that basically what this is?
So a lot of what we're talking about are strategies from that. And that's where the concept of the sleep window comes into play. And actually, with the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, CBT-I, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, is shown to be one of the top recommended protocol. The first thing we do before we get into meds and such, unless there are specific medical reasons for it. But it outperforms almost all of these other treatments and shown to be incredibly effective. Something I've seen work for decades for individuals, and I'm talking about all different people, from your corporate execs and the spec ops military and professional athletes to a stay-at-home mom, a college student, a retiree. And so the core for CBT-I is that sleep window concept. And that's where you look at the sleep window, you determine that piece. If you want me to walk through quickly how to do that, and then how you treat the bed, how you shut the brain off, how you're thinking about sleep, how you're relaxing the body for sleep, and all of these little changes without it feeling overwhelming. It's not that all of a sudden you have to change every single thing. You can do it in steps and stages. That's why the way we're even talking about it today, pick one of these things. Try it for a little bit. See what works for you. And not every single thing works for every person. That's okay. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean that your sleep will never be fixed. Does that
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. What do you advocate for if somebody wakes up in the middle of the night? I've heard that the last thing you should do is be productive. Start doing emails and all that, because you train your brain that this is 3 a.m. is a time to be productive. What are your thoughts on that?
When you first wake up, the first thing is going to be, okay, what is the next move here? So you may wake up because you have untreated sleep apnea and your body was just trying to get you to breathe again, and we want to do a little bit of relaxation or rollover. You may wake up because your bladder needs you to, run to the restroom, or you're waking up because your brain is active because you didn't do. So if your brain is always waking you up, let's see what we do before bed so that it doesn't need to do that. If your bladder is waking you up, obviously there can be certain health reasons, but maybe we pay attention to our liquid intake or what are the things that we're having before bed. If you're waking up because of the snoring or the breathing, obviously you want to move to the sleep study and such. If you just wake up and you're laying there, first see if you can roll over and go back to sleep. If you know that you're truly not going to fall back to sleep, it's been about 10 to 15 minutes, actually we want you to get out of bed. We don't want you to lay in bed and just force yourself to try to fall back to sleep, because it's not going to work. You're going to lay there, you're going to be more frustrated, you're going to start thinking. It's better to get out of bed and do something boring. Empty the dishwasher, fold the laundry. If you're going to watch something, have it be on TV and the TV's further away from you versus the screen in your face. If you're going to watch TV, sit on the couch, have your head in your hands and your elbows on your knees. So when you start to doze off, your head nods, you get up and you get back in bed instead of now you're asleep on the couch for 2 hours. Little tweaks that we can do there. But we don't want to lay in bed wide awake, because now we're going to associate the bed with being awake and with being frustrated. You know if you're going to fall back to sleep within the first few minutes or not. But you're right. We don't want to immediately have that be when we do our emails, and that's when we do all of our to-do lists. But we can do some boring things just to keep the light low. Some people will do stretching. Some people may, listen to a meditation, or maybe that's when they do some of their prayers. And so there's all different scheduling that different people do based on their life and their pieces. But don't look at that as, okay, now I have an hour to cross something off my to-do list. You do also want to be very cautious of what you eat and drink when you wake up in the middle of the night. Because if you're not getting enough water throughout the day, and then you drink water when you wake up in the middle of the night, your body will wake you up for hydration because it's learned that that's when it gets it. So be cautious for that piece. But that's how we can reduce the awakenings. Do you want me to take a quick minute and give the high level on the sleep window piece?
Would you mind? That'd be awesome.
So the idea of the sleep window is going to be training our body of when to sleep and taking back control over it. So I'll say simple steps, I'm going to kind of rapid fire through them. So step 1 is figuring out how much sleep you're currently getting. Take your 7 days, weekday, weekends, average across them, come up with one number, not a range. And if for any reason you're getting less than 5 hours a night, we're going to start with the number 5. For everyone else, we want it to be based in reality. So don't count time in bed is not time asleep, just if you're reading or you're awake. And don't make the number what you want to get or what you think you need. Start with being honest with yourself. If you're only getting 6 hours on average a night, that's okay. Start with 6. That's step 1, the number. Step 2 is going to be the when. So you're going to look at your whole week and figure out what the earliest is that you have to wake up across your 7 days. Maybe you're up at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday and a Thursday for a wake out class. Great. We take that number, 6 a.m. We take your number from step 1, 6 hours. We work backwards, and that gives us the window. So 6 a.m., 6 hours, that means a 12 midnight bedtime. I get that might feel really late, so we can make it 11 to 5 or 10 to 4, but we're not stretching the window just because we want to spend more time in bed. Because if we don't have enough sleepiness to fill the window, of course we're going to wake up more, or it's going to be harder to fall asleep, or we're going to wake up sooner than we want. And remember, we start with the wake time because I will eventually make that window bigger, but the wake time won't change. That's why we start and work backwards. Step 1, your number, say 6 hours, for example. Step 2, the window. Take wake time, number from step 1, count back. That's what we're starting point. Step 3 is that we're going to stick to that new schedule for 7 days. So that means if midnight's your bedtime, you don't get in bed at 11 to read. You can read somewhere else, but when you get in bed at midnight, that's not when you read. That's when the lights are out, head is on pillow, your job is sleep. And when the alarm goes off at 6 a.m., if that's the wake time, even if you didn't fall asleep till 5:55, or you woke up 7 times that night, you still get out of bed. And yes, you are going to feel tired, but that's a good thing. We want to feel tired, because if we're tired, that means that when it's time to go to bed the next night, we're going to fall asleep faster. If you skip lunch, you're more hungry for dinner. That's why during those 7 days, we're not going to take a nap. And I'm not saying that you'll never take a nap again, but we want to build up our sleepiness. So then that way we're able to fall asleep. We have more sleep momentum to sleep through the night. And then after those 7 days, step 4 is to evaluate and adjust. And so with that key, that's where we start to look at being the efficient sleepers. That 90 to 95% of the time that we're in bed, we're asleep. And that practically looks like getting in bed and falling asleep within 10 to 15 minutes, sleeping straight through the night, minus a bladder break, waking up, feeling rested, and not needing the nap. And if that is you, then you've hit your sleep sweet spot. If it's not, then we adjust. If you're still waking up multiple times, we'll have to shrink the window a little bit to squeeze out the awakenings, just like you squeeze the air out of the Ziploc bag. If you're sleeping through the night and you still feel tired, now we expand the window, and that's that 15-minute number of 15-minute increments. So instead of 12 to 6, now we're going to do 11:45 to 6 and do that for 7 days, and then 11:30 to 6. And so you finally get to that sweet spot where you're falling asleep quickly, sleeping through the night, and waking up and feeling rested. Now, if you have somebody that has untreated sleep apnea, we can't do this because they need to wake up multiple times to start breathing again, and then we need to address the sleep apnea, which is another conversation we could have. But in general, for the typical sleeper, this is the approach to get you back on that schedule, just like we would do, a January jumpstart food detox or whatever, and then we work our starts back in. That's the same thing with naps. Naps are a great thing. People love their naps. I'm not saying that you will never nap again, but we want naps to be power naps, that 20 to get 30 minutes, that quick boost of energy before 3 p.m. in the day. And we don't want it to be at the same time every day. Because if you take a nap at the same time every day, your body expects it and you will automatically start feeling tired at nap time.
Gotcha. Can I repeat some of that back to you?
Please.
To make sure. So the first thing we do is
So much.
we survey our past week and how many hours on average we slept.
I would actually take a little bit of a broader than just a week, because with your busy people here, they're probably going to have 1 week where they're traveling or some other meetings. So we'll usually try to look at a few weeks to get the average of what they're really truly getting, to be honest with themselves.
Perfect. And then I look at what's the earliest time that I need to get up on a regular basis. If I'm up at 6 on Tuesday and Thursdays, but I don't have to get up until 7 the rest of the week, it's 6 o'clock.
All 7 days, even on the weekend.
Then I work backwards from 6 a.m. to that average. If it was a 6-hour average, bedtime's midnight. I'm getting up at 6. And I do that for a few days, and then I 7 days. Then after the 7 days, I can start trying to go to bed a little bit earlier and see if I sleep through the night.
So we do 7 days because we need to get the body on that system. And the first night or two, you're probably going to be fighting it, especially, or you might feel like, oh, well, I usually get in bed at 9 or 10 to read and I don't fall in bed asleep until 11, but what am I going to do? So it takes a little bit of time, or, oh, but I still woke up 2-3 hours and I'm exhausted. Maybe I cheated and let myself sleep longer than I should. So it takes about 7 days to really get yourself on that rhythm. And I'll say this, if you haven't slept well for weeks, months, or years, I'm asking for days. But so you do that. And then after the 7 days, you evaluate. And then that's where, depending on what your sleep looked like for those 7 days, depends on if you change it or not. Okay. You don't automatically change it.
Gotcha. So helpful. I love tips like that because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And it's so hard to find good sleep information out there. I can find all kinds of nutrition information and exercise information, but sleep, very few people are talking about it. So this was so helpful. Sleep apnea.
Yeah.
Overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed?
I mean, I won't say overdiagnosed because typically you're going to go into a lab and do a sleep study, or you're going to do a home-based sleep study. And so in order to get the diagnosis, the majority of the time you're actually doing some type of diagnostic test to detect it. There is a range from mild to severe. What I tend to see is that typically it's very underdiagnosed because people aren't wanting to go to get checked for it because they have certain beliefs in their mind of, well, one, I don't want to go into the lab and sleep in the hospital. Okay, you can do it at home in your own bed now. You can work with the doctor and they'll send it to your house so we can remove that obstacle. Oh, I don't want to wear the CPAP machine, so I'm not even going to do it. I don't want to know about it. Okay, well, we need to know what's going on. And if you truly cannot tolerate a CPAP machine, there are a lot of people that say they can't and they can. But for the people that truly can't, there are alternatives. There are options that you can do that will get you breathing again versus the untreated sleep apnea, if we're going to talk about it. So every time you hit REM sleep, most people experience the majority of their sleep apnea episodes when they're in REM sleep. So for these people, they hit REM sleep, they stop breathing, the body wakes them up. So the majority of those folks don't do a lot of dreaming, don't have a lot of REM sleep. So now they're going to see faster cognitive decline. It's one of the high risk factors for early onset Alzheimer's, cognitive decline, dementia. Sleep apnea also is a significant in terms of risk factor for heart health. That's why the American Heart Association added sleep to their Life's Essential 8. And so there are so many things, not just physically, but for the brain and cognitively in our health, mentally, physically, so many different things that do the sleep study, find out how severe it is, And then let's talk about solutions. Maybe you see a specific dental provider that's gone through the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine programs for sleep apnea. And we get you customized mouth guard that you can wear that your insurance will contribute to potentially. There's laser treatments, no cutting, no bleeding, that can potentially be used to trigger collagen and open up airways. There are surgical things that can be done if you have the deviated septums and the collapsed nasal valves. It doesn't always mean that your only option is a CPAP machine, but if you're doing nothing about it, you are significantly increasing risk across so many brain and body health concerns. And so there's just, not to mention being exhausted during the day and waking up with the headaches and having all of these other issues, and then having a shorter fuse so you're less resilient and you can't be as creative, and the impact on your relationships. So lots to talk about here, probably for another time, but don't be afraid of the sleep study. Don't be afraid of the CPAP machine. And if you can't tolerate it, that's okay. We have solutions for you. Reach out to me and I will connect you to a provider that can help you.
Great. And I just got one quick follow-up question on that. What are some of the symptoms that I might have or a loved one might have that means we should go get tested?
So, I mean, most people know the core of the snoring, and the snoring at night, and the gasping for air, and the waking up and not feeling like you can breathe. If you think about the snoring, it's because the air is passing over an obstruction. So there's an obstruction there. But there's a separate kind of sleep apnea. Instead of obstructive sleep apnea, it's called centralized sleep apnea. And sometimes that has to deal with how the brain is functioning. And some people will stop breathing even without the snoring. So it's worth checking if you have these other symptoms as well. For people with OSA, sleep apnea, all these things, not only is it the snoring at night, but when you wake up, maybe you find that you slept through the night, but you still just feel tired all the time. You don't feel fully rested. Well, yeah, if your body had to work so much harder to breathe, it couldn't fully rest and relax. A lot of people will wake up with a headache, and it could be a mild headache. It'll fade away throughout the day, but because of the oxygen restriction, the way the body's working. Some people will have the sore throat or feel like they feel a bit hoarse from sleeping with their mouth open and mouth breathing. There's many different things. Some people will feel more moody or irritable. I mean, it could go through many things, but I usually say if you wake up and you slept and you still feel tired, if your throat is sore, if you have that little bit of the headache, if you find just a little more foggy, it's a little harder to concentrate, and your memory isn't exactly what you ideally want it to be. And then, of course, the snoring, especially for a lot of people. If you also find that your sleep, maybe you sleep really well for the first 3 or 4 hours, and then you're waking up every hour and a half to 2 hours the rest of the night. A lot of people think it's their bladder waking them up, but it could be that they're waking up when they hit that REM sleep. And then once they wake up, they realize they need to use the restroom. So pay attention to your patterns of awakening in the middle of the night as well.
Excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Melissa Milanak, this was so helpful. Thank you for sharing so much knowledge that really isn't just knowledge for us to put in our brains, but it's knowledge that if put into practice can change the trajectory of our life. And one of the things you said, Melissa, so much, but one of the things you said that is so counterintuitive really is that if you are putting exercise and nutrition and other aspects of healthy living ahead of sleep, you've got it backwards. Those other things are important, but if your sleep isn't dialed in, you're not going to get the results. You're not going to be able to lead and love and live the way that God has made us to live and love and lead. So thank you so much. You've been a great guest, and we will do a part 2. We have to do a part 2. So if you would have me, we'll be back in touch. So if people want to...
Thank you so much for having me. And
yeah.
Go ahead.
If people want to get in touch with you, they want to follow you, how do they do that?
So my website's a great place to connect in the sense of I have many resources on there. I have video libraries with free trainings and tips and guides and such. So anytime they want to go on there, and if they fill out the contact and say that they got connected through this podcast, then they qualify for a free quick consultation if they have sleep questions, so they can leverage that for listening to Delay the Decay. And then also on social media, so for instance, on Instagram, Dr. Melissa Milanak, they can see all different videos and tips and strategies, and we'll be announcing when the book is coming out in early next year.
Fantastic. Give a quick plug on the book. What's the name of the book going to be again?
So the book is called Sleep for Success.
Okay.
It goes through a lot of the information that we've talked about here, and it's truly how can you be living your best life across all of the domains. So looking at it for our physical health, our mental and emotional, spiritual health, all these aspects, as well as for a thriving career.
Can't wait. Melissa, thank you so much. Delay the Decay peeps, thanks for being with me for yet another episode. And remember, this life, this week, this day is about living in a healthy direction. It's not about getting hung up on perfection. Until next time, enjoy your week, and we'll see you then.
Sweet dreams.